Hi, everybody. I would love to welcome you tonight to tonight's Vicki and Carl Zeiger Insight Seminar for El Borracho. We have the namesakes themselves. Vicki and Carl Zeiger are here. So can we please have a round of applause for our sponsors for this event? It's so lovely to see you both. Thank you so much for being here. We have the great pleasure of having our director of El Borracho with us, Mr. Edward Torres, right here with us.
Thank you to all for being here. How's everyone? Yes.
The empty chair is for Elijah. He might be joining us. My mom would be happy that I made that joke, but nobody else is. Tony Meneses, our playwright, might be on his way. He's running a little bit late. His mother is in town, so they're finishing up a little bit dinner. He's going to come and join us in a little bit. So it's a special time for a playwright and his mom. So we don't want to rush him with that. But in his stead, we have the amazing Eddie Torres, who is one of my favorite people on this planet.
Thank you.
I'm going to embarrass Eddie and give a little bit of who he is and what he's done with us.
Lord.
But he should be well known to Globe audience. This is his fourth show here at the Globe. He has directed Familiar, Native Gardens, and Water by the Spoonful, which are all beautiful productions. His work has also been seen here in the Powers New Voices Festival, where El Borracho was last seen here in 2020. It was one of the last things we did before we shut down. And he was also part of our Classical Directing Fellowship program, and he holds a directing commission from us, which is a new thing. So it's really exciting.
Thank you.
His work has been seen all around the country, the Victory Gardens Theater, Teatro Vista, which he is a co-founder and the artistic director emeritus of. I would love to be emeritus of something someday. He's also worked at the Geffen, Second Stage, the Goodman, the Public Theater, and many more across the country. He is an assistant professor at Wesleyan University, which used to beat the pants off me in lacrosse when I was at Tufts. So it was a 2-hour drive to hell. And then he's also when he's not directing, he's also an actor. He is just seen at Steppenwolf and then at the National Theatre in London, Bruce Norris's world premiere play Downstate, which may show up in a state on the East Coast sometime soon. So if you want to see him act, you can see that as well. Eddie Torres, he's one of my, I gotta just say, Eddie is my heart. Eddie is one of just the pure gentleman of the theater and just a special person that we're so glad to have in our orbit here at the Old Globe. Everybody, Eddie Torres.
Thank you, Justin. And you're in my heart too, and the staff here at the Old Globe, and Danielle, who's back there, just checking everybody. How you doing? Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So I'm here to talk about El Borracho and any questions that you may have, and how.
Well, I'm going to start off with a couple, and then we'll open it up to everybody.
Go for it.
So you've been here a lot, so we've heard a lot from you in the past.
Yes.
People who are favorites of these seminars have seen a lot of Eddie Torres.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about El Borracho? Tell what El Borracho is about.
El Borracho takes place in Texas, and it is primarily about a family who is kind of captivated by each other. They've been kind of drawn apart by alcoholism. And it's a very, very universal piece. In this play, the son, who is David, is taking care of his father. His father's divorced from his mother, Alma, and the father being named Raul. And so the father, through a certain amount of time, has declined and doesn't have a home, doesn't have a place today. So the son wants to be able to bring him back to a place to live. And so the only place to really do that, because he's in college, is to bring him back with his mother, which is his ex-wife. So it is a very heartwarming, a very funny piece about the state of the family here in America. The fact that they are an immigrant family, David being first generation, is not really what the story is about, but it is about addiction, about love, about loss, and how we navigate those types of adversities as human beings. And so for me, this is one of the really most wonderful things about the play, is that it's something that we can all relate to. So Tony has written a really beautiful piece. The production here, I believe, is, as you will see, is really wonderful. But it's full of love, and it's also full of hope. And that's something that I think we all need, especially having gone through this pandemic. And issues, in this country in particular, about how we get along together as people, even though we're all different. We are one group, which is the human race, and so we often kind of forget that, when it comes to whether we're from a different country or a different color, we forget that we're human beings and that we all should be able to be able to meet each other on that same level.
Thank you for that, Eddie. And one of the great things about this piece, and we've talked about this a lot, is it comes from the lineage of great American family plays.
Yes.
Right? Like, we all know the family drama. What Tony, I think, has done here is taking what O'Neill did with Long Day's Journey, and
yes.
what Miller does with Death of a Salesman,
yes.
and what and turning it into something that's now, and looking at it in a different lens. And it's an amazing thing. I mean, Tony would say this himself. One of the things that he likes to think of his work as is Mexicovian.
Yes,
he's trademarked the term, so please don't tweet. No hashtag Mexicovian. Can you talk about a little bit what that means? It's so interesting, all the influences that he works on in this play.
Yeah, I mean, I think the primary influence is Chekhov himself. Being realistic, being honest, the idea of dramatic choices that really reflect the human spirit. What does that mean within the storytelling of this play? It's very, very Chekhov in that sense. So, especially, I think one of his favorite plays is Three Sisters. So it's very reminiscent of that, and very in terms of indulging the characters and what it is they're going through, what their adversity is, and how do they come out of that. It's the process of living, of actually really, really living. And to me, when you're talking about Miller or O'Neill, you're talking about amazing writers who have been able to capture that, and Tony is a very big fan of that, and he's managed to capture that in this story, which is personal to a certain extent. So when you're talking about Chekhovian or Mexicovian, that's what he's done. Actually, he's managed to do it. So when you see this play, and I remember getting this play from Justin first and reading it, I was like, wow. It is very Chekhov. It's got that Ibsen flair. It's got all these wonderful elements, rich of how we function as human beings. So I feel like that Chekhovian aspect is part of what you'll see tonight, and it's very real, and it's also very honest. And of course, in honesty lies the humor of things, which is what I think we all should be able to relate to.
Mm-hmm. And one of the greatest things I think about Chekhov too is what's not said. And what's between the words,
yes.
and what's inferred, and understanding what someone wants from the context. And I think that's something that's so much fun about this show. But it's a real challenge as a director.
Yes.
To say, what do they actually want? They're not saying it.
They're not saying it, but also it's in what they are seeing the other person react to. And a lot of Chekhov is also reflected in the silences. It's what's not being said, but what's being heard. And those moments are taken in by the character. We have a term that we use, allowing things to land. So when someone gives you a compliment, or let's say even like an insult, or you're not quite sure what they're saying, it affects you in a certain way, right? So that moment that you're thinking about what that person said is what we call the beat, and it's what you're going to see in the play. There'll be a lot of moments where someone says something, and they're not saying, they're thinking something else, but saying one thing. And then the other character's listening to it, and then they react off of that. And that's what we call reading in between the lines. It's what Justin's referring to. So there are things that are being said and not said, and things that are allowed to land on the character that you'll experience. And sometimes those moments are just as effective as actual words.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we the three of us were, having some, cocktails the other night, and
he makes great
just working.
cocktails. Just so you know,
we were having a business meeting.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
We were talking about a specific moment where Tony had written he didn't know what it was. He was like, something happens. It was like he cries.
Right.
And we didn't know what it was, and it wasn't really landing. So we were talking this out and chopping it up, and basically put in like the idea of like a larger kind of pantomime with like a lot of things going on.
Yes.
Like, how does something like that get installed? Or like, do you want to maybe talk specifically about it?
We can talk specifically about it, because that way you'll see it, you'll be able to look for it. But there's a moment in the play where the mother is pressing the son to talk about health issues related to himself, right? And he's pressing, and she's pressing and pressing him. And what we were trying to find within that moment is the son's reaction, which is usually full of emotion and, oh my God, no, you can't say this about me, right? But I think what Tony was looking for, what we were trying to do, is how do we get that moment in silence? All right? What is it that one character says that allows that person, that triggers that person to experience a certain type of emotion? And so how does that actor embody that? And then what does the actor who actually pressed for that emotion, how does she handle the result of it, right? So there's a moment in the play where the actor is pressed by the mother so much that he has this panic attack, right? So we tried to figure out the best way of turning it. Should we say he's going to have a panic attack? No, that's not a good idea. So maybe he should physically embody the panic attack like a lot of us normally do when we're pressed. You know, when I remember my mother pressing me, and I would be like, oh my God, I'm just going to go to the other room and I'm going to beat my head against the wall. Not quite that, but it was an emotion. I was reacting to what my mother was trying to get me to do. And so we were trying to craft a moment where the mother is pressing the son for this information. He then gets that information. He then processes it and he explodes, but we didn't want the explosion to be verbal. Very Chekhovian. Again, that actor allows that emotion to land, and then we get something else. We get words, but in silence and in action, that allow the mother to process it. So that she takes them, brings him, calms him down, like if you were having, like, you know, I don't know if anyone has ever experienced someone who has night terrors. My son used to have night terrors a lot. And I would have to do a certain ritual to get him to calm down. Well, we were looking for that ritual for this actor to do in the process of this explosion of emotion, which you're not going to hear, you'll see, right? So that's a really significant moment. And we had really interesting discussions about how do we actually do that. So you will see it in the play. So look for it. But again, it's very Chekhovian.
It's interesting in that, like the line, what's all that's in the script is, do you hear me? I hear you.
Yes.
Like, and it's like, well, all this happened, this story happens between those two lines.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of in that, but that's the kind of thing that's, it's like, how does he move from place to place? And what's the honesty of getting from one idea, one part of the conversation to the next?
Yeah. And Tony was looking for a way to write it. And our discussion was, well, do you need to write it? Do you need to add words to that moment? And so we went around the table and we're coming up with these ideas and then watching the show. And Justin gave us some advice in the realm of looking and discovering what that physical action would be that would say something without saying the words. So, yes. Yeah.
It's a really fun part about the discovery and the development of a piece, right? I mean, you started with this piece in the Powers New Voices Festival. Right. Now, 2 years ago. You know, and it was something that at that time we were hoping to do in 21, and then we were not able to have plays in 21. So you've had some time with this. So what is the development process of it gestating for this amount of time to go from a stage reading downstairs to then a fully produced production downstairs?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that you're talking about the pandemic, right? So I, spent 2 years with my wife in the apartment. And so, I'm sure you've heard this, that, for those moments in situations like that, if you can make it through that, you can make it through anything, right? And so when you're talking about El Borracho, and I'm an open book, ask me anything you want. When I was in the apartment, in my apartment. I was teaching remotely at Wesleyan, and then my wife was also, acting on Zoom. And, we were contained. I did not want to go outside, and she didn't want to go outside either. And it was safer to be inside. So I thought about, well, what would happen if I didn't make it through this situation, but I had nowhere else to go? And I would be in a room with someone that I don't like or get along with, even though they know me for like 20 years, right? And so kind of very similar to El Borracho, which is she spent 30, 40 years of her life with this man who she loved, but then all of a sudden decided to let him go. And she had a lot of adversity with him, but now he has to come back in the home. And you're talking about spaces that, even if you're in whatever home you live in, your home is your home, but it gets really small when you are you're dealing with people you don't want to deal with, right? And so that was like a motivating factor for me to like, how am I going to start this play? And so when you see with the set design, and you'll see it's a very small space that they have to deal with each other. You can't get away from each other here. So you're going to have to, and you're forced to confront the issues that have made your lives impossible together as a couple and also as a family. And so that is what it brought me to when I was in the pandemic with my wife. And we did make it. We didn't get a divorce, just so you know. But it was very trying at times. And I'm sure, like all couples and all folks who have been married for a certain amount of time, it can be very trying at times. So I thought a lot about that. Yeah.
In building the show, one of the things, in this time we're really proud of is that the diversity that we're having both on the stage and behind the scenes. And this is the first all Latinx design team.
Yes.
So set, lights, costume, sound, director. And it was a very important thing that we were trying to do, Eddie and I, when we were putting this together. I'll speak for Tony since he's not here.
Right.
And Tony has commented many times. He's like, I've never had a theater try to do that for me. Try to make a team that looked like me.
Right.
And that was a really special thing. And it's been a beautiful team to be able to have. One of our resident artists, David Reynoso, is doing set and costume. Mm-hmm. But, I think one of the things that I'm most intrigued by that you guys have been talking about is the use of music.
Yes.
Because music is such a big part of the play. Raul has to play guitar. Jesse Perez, who is the head of our MFA program, is playing Raul. He never played guitar before.
Never played guitar.
So he started taking lessons in November. Bless him.
Yes.
But the idea of what music is in this family.
Yeah, I think music in this family is also about reconnecting. Especially and particularly with Raul and Alma. They spent a lot of time together being musicians out, going from gig to gig in Mexico, then coming to the States, and then also having to leave that kind of artistry behind because it's very difficult to be a musician. And you have to go from gig to gig and do different things. And so they had a family. They had Alicia and David. The music curtailed off and then finally became non-existent. And it's one of the things that they both were passionate about. So think about if you had to leave whatever the passion you had away, had to let it go because you're busy getting your family together or getting your lives in order, and you drop the passion that you were starting with. It becomes a cruel bit of torture in a way. And so that is something that is really important in it because they were both musicians. And so, our amazing sound designer, David Molina, really went into the roots of norteño music and really did some research about what norteño music is and how it's played in this country and received, and came up with some really beautiful norteño classics that were emotionally connected to the family's memory of each other and their times in the past together. And so we were really looking for what is it that brings us back in time. What music is it that you connect to that allows you to relive a memory that's probably one of the most favorite times in your life. And so that's what Molina has done. And that's what also Tony has done by connecting the two. And it's the one thing that I think brings the entire family together is a certain song that you'll hear. And people often forget about music a lot, but it does that. It really does. It really brings you back and can reconnect you, and you can refamiliarize yourself as being a human being because of what you love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really fun, like that mix of live and recorded music.
Yes.
I'd like to open it up to some questions from everyone here. I'll try to repeat them as best I can so we can get them on tape. Yes, sir.
Is this the first time it's shown, or is this?
Yes, this is the world premiere. So this is first production.
So how active is Tony in what you're doing? How active is Tony in the development? Is
So,
very much a part of the development of this?
so the question is how active is Tony in the production process of his world premiere?
Well, ever since we decided to do, ever since it was chosen to do as the Powers Voices seminar in terms of like new plays at the Globe, he's been involved in every aspect of it. So from that reading, I don't know if anyone see the reading at all here. Yes, you did. Right. From that reading, he's been involved in it since day one, and even through the pandemic. Tony has communicated to both myself and to Justin and the artistic staff at the Old Globe the ideas that he wanted to set forth in the play. And so ever since that point in time up until now and all the way up until until we open, he's been involved in it consistently, being there, explaining certain scenes, explaining the certain motivations that actors have. And been involved in the entire process, also within the design and the music as well, because I think it's a personal story to him, and so I feel like we wanted to make sure he was totally involved in it from day one, so from the very beginning.
And one of the really cool things now is actually Tony has another world premiere happening on the other coast right now at Two River Theater in New Jersey. So he's been able to zoom in and be in two places. I mean, we all want to be cloned and be in two places at once, and he's figured out how to do it. So if you, well, actually, we can ask him because he is here now.
Yeah. Tony
Meneses, everybody. Thank you. I'm calling on him. He hasn't even put his bag down. Here's a round of applause. Hello, Tony.
Come on in, Tony.
We've been talking about you. Have your ears been burning?
Everything's been burning today. We're here.
Thanks,
We are here.
I'll let you get settled.
Yes.
Is there any other questions that we can ask? Because I have some for Tony. Yes, sir. How does one learn to play the guitar?
Wow.
Lessons.
Tons of lessons.
Lots of lessons. Yeah.
Well,
we have a great person. Her name's Heather Nation.
There you go.
She teaches in town. She's in bands. She's a wonderful, wonderful performer in herself and a great teacher. She's fantastic. Luckily, oddly, a lot of my personal friends outside here are in the music scene, so we have some good recommendations in that way. So it's been nice to kind of say, "Oh, I saw you at the music box. You're great. Yeah, would you like to teach Jesse how to play guitar? It'd be awesome."
Right, that's great. Great.
You open for Sounds good. Yeah, you'll do. Yes, ma'am.
What is the Two Rivers show?
What is your show at Two River Theater Company, Tony?
Okay, all right, quick plug. Yeah, that one is called The Hombres. This play is also kind of dealing with similar themes of just exploring male identity, Latino male identity. This one's an all-male cast. Sort of the elevator pitch is it's a group of construction workers decide to do yoga. And it's about machismo and sort of this unlikely friendship that happens between this yoga teacher and this sort of very macho, kind of taciturn construction worker who seeks yoga to sort of resolve a lot of anger issues that he's struggling with, and sort of this is his last resort to figure out what he can do. Mm-hmm. That's basically the short.
It's super cool. I'm going to embarrass Tony for a second because we didn't get to introduce him earlier. So if you don't mind.
Please.
So El Borracho was first seen at the Paris New Voices Festival in 2020. And his play Guadalupe in the Guest Room has been seen all over the country, including here in San Diego at New Village Arts in Carlsbad. He's had his plays workshop all over the country, including here, South Coast Rep, Denver Center, Berkeley Rep, the Lark, Sundance, SOA Rep, the murderer's row of every place that does workshops in the country. He holds commissions from South Coast Rep, the Denver Center, Two River Theater Company, Juilliard, and he has 2 commissions from us currently in his pocket. So we'll be seeing more of Tony Meneses around here. And he's a graduate of UT Austin and the Juilliard School, which I hear is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I had a couple questions that I wanted to ask you, if you forgive me usurping the time back. But what inspired you to write the piece?
Okay, there.
Yeah, we'll just start. We'll start with the big one.
That is the biggest one. I will just blame Marcia Norman is the easy answer. She was my teacher at the Juilliard School. Marcia Norman, Pulitzer winner for Night Mother. She just has this philosophical belief as writers we have to write at some point in our careers, the play that scares us. And as soon as she said that, this play came to mind, sort of the thing that I did not want to write about, but I knew at some point I probably had to, just to contend with it artistically. So it's biographical. It's about my father's last few weeks before he passed away, and sort of the circumstances of what happened during that time that I won't spoil because I think you're about to see the show, so I'll keep it a little bit mysterious. So yeah, I think that's where the play came from. Was just sort of writing about family. Is a scary task. You feel very vulnerable and very exposed. But you trust that your hand as an artist sort of can guide you through that very terrifying exercise. And, I ended up, I think, with the play at the end of it, hopefully. And, I think that's an answer. I don't know if it's the answer. So,
we talked a little bit about your trademark phrase of Mexicovian, and I was wondering if you could tell us from your lips what you feel about what that is and what that style is, and how you're going to see that embodied in the show.
Yeah, I hugely influenced by Chekhov's work, particularly sort of its disarming storytelling. That I think people maybe don't like Chekhov is because there's no plot or there's no stakes. It's about character. It's like the inner life that you get to see and explore. Which for me is very motivating because it's sort of these internal secrets from these characters that get revealed, whether they're quiet or big boisterous characters. All of Chekhov's characters have this inner life that we get to see either little glimpses of, or that's the stories to get to that point. And to me, that just reminds me of like my immigrant upbringing here specifically. That growing up here, you sort of get used to the fact that people don't see the fullness of your own humanity oftentimes, whether because of language barriers or just, the differences sometimes of a culture clash and cultural barriers. So I sort of connected the dots of like my Mexican immigrant experience to the characters in Chekhov. I think I joke like those Russians are Mexicans to me as far as I'm concerned. And aesthetically, for me as a Latino writer, I think there's boxes we're put into. I think kind of the most accessible genre available to us as writers is like magical realism, and I think I play with that tension a little bit. You'll see maybe a little bit of that tonight, but because that's already been so fully explored by other better writers than me, I kind of wanted to make my own lane and sort of create something that I haven't seen before. I don't think I've seen characters like this before, storytelling like this before, so hopefully I'm kind of breaking ground and just grounded human storytelling that these characters also just happen to be Latino and Latina and of the Latine experience.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean it's so beautiful to see how like deftly you maneuver the characterizations, and we've talked a lot about that in your like before you got here. One of the things I was wondering is, like, I asked Eddie this a little bit, but it's like how I always think that as an artist is like you're when you make something, you're a person, and then like you change a lot, and then you go back and look at a piece of art that you made and be like, would I ever make that again? And I always think it's really palpable with a playwright. It's like, and especially in the time that we've had in intervening time of when this piece was written to where we are, I'm just wondering, like, how has the piece changed for you or your relationship to it, and what is it Is there anything new that's coming out of it after the intermission that we had?
I clock the point of view of the main character, my father, basically. He ends up in this apartment and loses a sense of time, and sort of days blur, and he feels trapped in there. So I think now we all can know what that feels like. And it's not. There's just like a line or two that explores that, just like the blurring of these events and of our days. So that landed differently for my ears. There's like one reference to face masks that like now that has different connotations and how we walk through space now. But yeah, I think if anything, I think the last year and a half will ground us, I think, very fully in his experience and sort of the tension of feeling this restlessness and this container entrapment of being in this space and being in this play.
Yeah, indeed. Let me open it back up to yes, ma'am.
So condolences on the passing of your father.
I appreciate that.
What's your family's take on this? I mean, I always wonder when you're reading memoirs, there's a family whose story is being told. And how does your family react to your play? And congratulations for bringing it to the stage.
Yeah, I think.
So,
Yeah.
just repeating the questions. So what has your family been able to see? Well, they haven't seen it yet because we're premiering it, but what's your family's reaction to the piece?
I mean, find me after the show because my mom is here and I'll get her take. I'm very curious what's about to happen, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, I as soon as the idea came, I obviously reached out and was like, hey, I'm thinking about writing this about this period of time. Just FYI. And then my siblings, thankfully I avoided that conversation. They're alluded to, but they're not in the play. So I don't have to worry about their portrayal or their characterization. So they're there, but they're not a physical presence in the world. It's there's just a lot of skeletons that are about to be exposed, a lot of demons that are about to be exposed. But I think what's been really refreshing so far in the preview process, I think why I didn't want to write this for a long time is I sort of thought, maybe this is too specific and that it might be inaccessible for that reason. But if anything, the feedback of the last few days is that actually the main character's name is Raul, and that's actually my dad's real name too. Also my legal name, by the way, too. I'm Raul Antonio. That we all have a Raul in our lives, whether it's our brothers or fathers or grandfathers. The issues of addiction and men who are inaccessible for whatever reasons. That you can't decipher, and I think it's also culturally rooted. I've often joked like Latino men are kind of a mystery to me. So I try to get the bead, but it's kind of hard. And I see myself as a Latino man. Sometimes I feel like my behavior is just like, why am I doing this? And I feel bad for those that are around me. So I think it's gosh, I don't even know where this all started. Oh, family. Yes, family. Being exposed. Yes. What else? Yeah, I think that's the full thought or a thought.
Stay tuned for the next
very
Insight
yes.
Seminar.
Find
On
us
the
after
next
the
episode of the Vicki and Carl Zeiger Insight Seminar, we will answer your question. Yes, ma'am. You had a question?
Yes, my voice is soft anyway. I noticed one of the plays you're doing later this year, you're doing some performances in Spanish. And I wondered if you considered this play for doing that. Or is it just not important enough an aspect?
Well, it's interesting. So the question is whether or not we could do this play bilingually. In what I can answer it from my take is that this is its world premiere. It's never been done before. So to try to do it in two languages at one time would be very, very difficult. Mala, which we're doing in Spanish, is a play that's been done several times. It was premiered, and the woman who wrote it is actually going to appear in it. And there was Audible. Thank you, our overlords at Amazon. They actually commissioned a translation of it for their podcasting. So it was so there's an existing translation that already works, so that it's been vetted and approved and what have you. So it wasn't going to ask someone else to write the play and then translate it at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it's also a step in that moment. It's like we're trying to do more bilingually and where we can have that content, and that's a very specific way of being able to do it where we know we feel very confident that it can be successful in that way because it exists. We know what we're looking at, and we know that we can provide it in the way that it works. And also, that's a one-person show, so we just hire one other person to do it in Spanish. This would be, if we had to cast this show knowing that everyone had to be bilingual or to do it again, have a second cast, it's just exponentially more expensive. So that is how the sausage is made answer to that question. Who fell asleep? Is there anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
The translation of Borracho to English.
What is the genesis of El Borracho?
The etymology is of the Loteria game. If you've ever seen our Mexican, Latin American bingo game, it's with all the little images of there's a mermaid. It's on the poster, so you'll see it soon. It's also on the program. But that's our version. That's our version of Monopoly. I guess that's the common American board game that you play with family, and we play Loteria. And that's one of the characters on there, which is sort of like the drunkard. And I just find it funny that image is so pervasive in Mexican culture that there's even a card game character devoted to it. So in terms of, again, if this is too specific, I think we all can connect to the issues and the sort of the topicalness of what's behind that image. And for me, it's just about grounding and humanizing that image too. So it's inspired by the board game primarily, and then we go from there.
Excellent. I have one last question before we wrap up. I just want to ask you both, what do you want the audiences to come away with after seeing the show? What do you want them to feel?
I want them to feel the humanity in the story, and be able to draw from that a personal connection from that story. Again, as I was saying earlier, just because it's called El Borracho doesn't mean that it shouldn't be universal to you and other people. So I really want that to really permeate the audience and understand that we are human beings first, and that there are stories like this that connects us and tie us and bind us together.
Yeah, I mean, that's eloquently put for me, but it's the magic of storytelling. I hope this tonight feels like that sort of why we go to plays or movies or TV shows, why we go to these spaces, because we extrapolate what's going on there, the humanity of these characters, the themes, the ideas, to our own lives. And the cultural aspect is important to me because as I referenced, I love Chekhov, and I have no problem identifying with any of those characters. And they're from a different time period, they're a different culture, they're a different race. And I very easily do that magic of saying, yep, I see myself there. So I hope, it's a rare gift to be able to provide a space for Latino characters to be seen as just human beings. So I hope you're able to receive that in sort of the reverse of that transaction and say, yeah, I know that woman. That kid reminds me of my son. So I hope that can happen tonight. And laughter, too. It's very funny, I promise. It's a funny play. I promise you, it's funny.
It is very funny. But bring tissues also. The mask wearing with crying, it's a thing. So I would love to thank these two amazing gentlemen.
Sorry I was late.
And Torres.
Thank you.
For their amazing time and their intellect and their kindness with us. I'd like to thank Vicki and Carl Zeiger for sponsoring this seminar again.
Yes, thank you.
El Borracho opens on Thursday and runs for a while, and then Trouble in Mind is running next door on the Old Globe stage, and that runs into early March as well. So there's a lot going on here at the Old Globe. So please come check us out. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for your time, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.